let you know when that is. We will also be, I know that one of the first questions I'm going to get is, will the slides be available? Yes, we will also make the slides available. And again, after the session, you'll get an email from us giving you all those kinds of details. Just so those are a few of the housekeeping, what else do we have here? We're going to hold Q&A until the end, and we're going to do it online. You should notice at the bottom of that panel on your right, a box rather that says questions. And that's where we'll be able to handle any of that kind of questions. That's where you can type them in, and then we'll respond and get them from there. If we don't, by the way, have time at the end of the session for all of them, then we will deal with them in email and let everybody know the results of those questions, what they were and what our responses were. So you'll get everything from today. So thank you very much for joining us today. My name is Bob Schechterly. I'm Accelerize 360, sorry, just getting into my presentation voice here. And I'll be one of the presenters today, along with Mark Klagenberg from Utribo. Together we're going to tag team the presentation. So don't be confused if my voice seems to change periodically. It's not puberty. It's Mark joining in and adding some commentary.
Hi, everyone. Mark here.
So with that, we have a great topic today. What's keeping you from the Salesforce promised land? This is something that's resonated with all of you, clearly, because you've joined us. And if you thought you were dialing into another webinar, well, stick around. I think you're going to find this interesting anyway. And, it's something that we hear over and over from our clients, and I know Mark does from his too. As a matter of fact, I've got a little story that illustrates this and kind of how it helped us gel this concept from what we're hearing from clients and what we've seen. Salesforce has been on the road with their Salesforce Essentials Roadshow. I don't know how many of you may have attended one. If you did, raise your hands. Okay, I admit I can't see you raise hands, but I'm sure some of you did. And they had a very impressive presentation. Part of it, they showed that they had a customer who makes power tools, who had put chips in their power tools where they could collect performance data and problems, and then they could route that back up to Service Cloud and create cases and outreach to their customers. And it was pretty 22nd century. As I looked around the room as they were giving this, I saw, frankly, a lot of blank faces. And so at the break at the reception, we talked to a bunch of people who were there, Salesforce customers, and everybody said pretty much, "Gee, that was really cool, but I'm just trying to manage my pipeline more effectively. How do I do that?" So that's really what we found, is that yes, there's a great promise in Salesforce. A lot of things that you can do with it, and we're going to talk about what some of those are. But frankly, getting from where you are today to that point can be a long journey, and it's not always very clear on how to navigate. So we're going to talk about that today. All right. Let's talk a little bit about our agenda, and then we'll dive right in here. So I'm going to start by talking a little bit about what actually that promise of Salesforce is, and when we think about it, how we set the stage for that. Then I'm going to talk about roadblocks and detours. So what are the things that keep you from achieving that goal? And my slides are not advancing. Tell you what I'm going to do. Bear with me for a moment here. We're going to have a quick technology change. Mark, I'm going to make you the presenter.
Okay.
You have the PowerPoint, yes?
Yes. Okay. Okay. Okay, whenever you're ready.
Okay, I just made you the presenter. Why don't you show your screen?
All right. Can everyone?
I can see it, yes. So pop us to the next slide, please.
Ah, what a handsome pair.
There we go. Okay, one more slide. We've all seen it. That's where we were a moment ago. Yeah, kind of scary-looking characters, huh? Oh, here's the agenda. Thanks for bearing with us for a moment, folks. So we're going to talk about the promise. What are some of the roadblocks? How do you start to build a superhighway, get around those roadblocks? And then we're going to talk about an example and give you a little demo of some things. And then we'll also talk about, okay, once we've laid some of that out, how do you actually stay on the road? So you built this great road, but there's, you want to avoid those details, those detours were there. And then how are we going to wrap it up? So let's go ahead and advance to the next slide, please. Great. I love it when technology finally works. So before we dive into talking about the promise itself, we have a little brief message from our sponsors. In other words, Accelerize 360 and utribo. Accelerize 360, we're a cloud consulting company with a key difference, we believe. We focus on real-world cloud solution problems that drive quantifiable business value to you rather than trying to maximize our revenue through billable hours. So, we have a customer-centric view here. To accomplish that, we build partnerships with key industry providers you'll see on the left, right? Salesforce, clearly one of them. We're a Cloud Alliance partner, as well as working with key customers, and those are some of the, that's just a sampling of logos there on the right. In terms of, you can see that this spans everything from Fortune 100 companies to small businesses and small and medium-sized businesses. Let's talk about the next slide, please. We help those companies by delivering best-in-class services for cloud implementation, on-demand support, value wave lifecycle services, and custom consulting. I'm not going to talk about these in great detail now, but you can see I've got these split into 4. On the implementation side, a lot of you probably already have Salesforce, that's why you're here. But perhaps you're thinking about implementing Service Cloud or Marketing Cloud, or you have other challenges from an integration perspective. On-demand is really about thinking about, we hear about this a lot from our users, is I just need a report right now. Right? Maybe we have an admin that could do it, but they're busy on something else. So a way to get the things you need when you need them at a fixed price. Value, as I said, is all about the life cycle of managing your, in this case, Salesforce environment. And gives you a deeper level, potentially, of support. And then consulting, this can take on many types. Anything from innovation to mobility, custom development. As a matter of fact, we have one large client that had a challenge around a business process where they had to submit lengthy paper-based applications to the government for a program. And they had to do this over and over again. So we helped them build a Force.com custom application to automate that and allow them then to link that and integrate it with Salesforce and track it through their Salesforce environment. So there's lots of different ways that we're helping clients today. Next slide, please. And not only next slide, but Mark, why don't you tell us a little bit about utribo?
Hi. Thanks, Bob. Well, we're a small company. We develop in-context collaboration solutions specifically designed to enhance small business productivity. And what that results in the Salesforce realm is helping managers and organizations better understand sales activity in their pipeline. Our flagship product is a product called SalesAmp for Salesforce, and really what it does is it collects, it makes and receives calls within Salesforce and tracks that information richly within Salesforce. One thing I will mention about the application is it's available on AppExchange, and you can find that and get a free trial from our AppExchange site. Back to you, Bob.
Great. Why don't you go ahead and click it twice. We're going to start by setting the stage here regarding the promise. Right? What do we mean when we say that? I alluded to it earlier, but put some context around it, and then we'll be able to talk about what keeps us from getting there. So I don't know how many of you recognize Peter Drucker or have read his books, but he once said the purpose of business is to create and keep a customer. Pretty important, right? I think we can all agree with that. Let's go ahead and click through. Please, there you go. And you can click through this build, Mark. And you know what? Things used to be easy. When he made that statement, it was the time of Mad Men. Let's make a TV reference here. The lines were clearly drawn, right? Marketing got the leads. Sales closed them. And customer service took over after that and pretty much maintained that customer relationship. Very simple situation. Let's go ahead and click again through the next slide. Wow, there's a lot there, right? That's because things have changed and they've gotten much more complex. Both in the TV shows and in the real world. Well, I guess real world, that's a TV show too. But regardless, it's very complex to manage that process that Peter Drucker talked about. Marketing is no longer just about driving leads through mail and advertising. Social media has taken over a big part of the awareness and interest parts of the equation. As a matter of fact, you'll see there on the left, 60% of buyer journey is complete before they ever interact with sales. So we no longer have the control over the process we used to have. Traditional content is often not used, right? 90% of selling content or resources are never used. 90%. Man, I think I'm starting to worry about my job a little bit here. Mobility and big data, these are key drivers in what is consumed and how it's consumed, right? So it's not only that it's gone onto the web, but it's gone onto mobile devices as well. And so we have to be able to embrace that in the technologies and strategies we use to address Peter Drucker's simple process. And most telling, I think, on this slide are the pipeline stats, right? 58% ends in no decision. 59% of salesperson's time is not spent selling and working that pipeline. And 88% of missed opportunities were because sales couldn't find or leverage the internal resources. So, as I was taught to say, that's a big opportunity, right? Next slide. Wow, a lot of boxes on this slide, huh? There's a reason, right? This opportunity is where the promise is. All of these elements have become part of the promise of CRM, and in particular the promise of Salesforce, the promise of automation to simplify, of integration to do it once and use it everywhere, of best practices. Don't just automate it the right way. Learn from the leaders. Real-time visibility, improved pipeline, both quality and quantity, faster sales cycles. So that's about focus, right? Increased revenue, better, faster, cheaper. All opportunity in terms of what the promise is. We even have a new promise, effortless customer service. That was part of Salesforce Essentials presentation, and I liked it. But again, it's continuing to expand that promise, that target that we all want to hit in one way or another. And of course, world peace. Okay, Salesforce doesn't offer that in the promise, but it would be a good one to shoot for anyway. I bet those of you on the call, if you could achieve half of those elements, or at least of these boxes, you'd be thrilled. And that's why you're here today. Let's try the next slide. So from an Accelerize 360 perspective, this is how we look at that, right? We want you to be successful, and we've built a framework of services to help you get there. We'll take a look at some of those in a little more detail. And Utribo has an element of this as well. Go ahead, Mark.
Yeah. Again, we're definitely very focused on real-time collaboration, but we find that that real-time collaboration is very valuable within the Sales Cloud, the Service Cloud. It really speaks to user adoption of the sales folks. We think it's important to touch upon marketing and on analytics within the Salesforce Cloud.
Great. All right. So if that's the promise, that's what we all want to achieve, or at least some subset of that based on our organizations. I guess Salesforce's answer is just install Salesforce. You go ahead and click again so when we get to the next slide, we're ready, Mark. But it's one thing to note the difficulty, and it's another to identify the individual challenges, and that's what we're going to look at here, right? What are some of the actual barriers that I don't pretend that I've gotten them all here, but as we take a look at this, they fall into three major areas and then a lot of subsets below that, right? And we see this consistently across our clients. So it starts perhaps with poor, or instead of using poor, it's so judgmental, uninformed implementation. We see this a lot, things like inconsistent field usage, overly complex processes, no documentation. Yes, I know it's the world of the internet and we don't like a lot of paper, but things still need to be documented electronically in terms of the processes and how we're going to use them, how we're going to use the fields and the objects, etc. Back to the if only I knew then what I know now. And this is partly why 59% of the time of sales is not spent selling. They're dealing with these implementation issues. Infrastructure challenges, and by that, I don't just mean the technology, I mean people as well as tools. And people might be, I don't have enough, right? It could be a bandwidth problem that's a barrier. And it could be that I do have people, but I don't have the people with all of the right expertise. They're great for day-to-day management of the system and administration, but when I need to do something more complex, like a trigger, or maybe implement a new module from new product from Salesforce, that's not something that's in their bag of tricks, which is perfectly fine. But that leads to other challenges, so bandwidth, expertise I mentioned, lack of governance and prioritization. And then failure to evolve or failure to launch, right? It could be as simple as new versions of the Salesforce products, right? Come out 3 times a year and you need to upgrade. Part of that, and I have the very first bullet there, customization paralysis. And this gets back to uninformed implementation. If you got a lot of customizations that aren't done very well or documented very well, it's going to be very difficult to upgrade. And frankly, in addition to that, business changes, right? Your business grows, your sales strategy changes, you may be acquired or acquire somebody. There's lots of reasons where you need to change and update on the way you use Salesforce. Those can be significant barriers to achieving the promise. And as a matter of fact, we've got one area in particular that we want to dive in a little more deeply. Mark, you want to go to the next slide and talk about it?
Yeah, and again, this is from utribo's perspective, as we're very focused on calling activity with sales folks and sales development. And I think there was an interesting point that Bob made a few slides ago, that 58% of the time sales reps can spend as much as 58% of their time not talking to customers. And you know, I don't know if there's a good statistic that proves this out, but I would say more time with customers is better for sales folks. And so some of the things that we're seeing with our customers is things that that tend to happen if you don't have a good handle on calling activity. Is you tend to sales organizations tend to focus on opportunities that at the end of the pipeline, which will diminish your efforts to obtain fresh leads. Of course, this depends on your type of business. You may have a rich organization developing sales independently, but we also, because we're very focused on medium-sized business, we find that sales are often wearing many hats. In fact, it could be Blue Jean Fridays is calling customers day. And what you tend to find is that there's sometimes not a good focus on the full pipeline within the organization. The second thing we're seeing is we're not constantly qualifying leads at every step, which leads to maintaining a good lead process and a good customer profile throughout the sales process. As sales managers, often we tend to get focused on deals that are about to close, and we're not paying attention to the things that happen in the middle. Well, one of the things that tracking activity can do is it can really help you get a full picture of what's going on with an opportunity. I'll speak a little bit more to that as we go through. The third thing we're seeing is keeping your pipeline static. Now, not every sales process is made equal. If you don't have tools to assess your sales process and your pipeline, you have no way to make it better or to develop best practices that'll suit your business. Believe it or not, we're very focused on calling activity, but some of the biggest successes we've had as an organization is to get our customers actually make less calls, and that's an interesting win. But it's driving metrics that can help you improve your sales. And the fourth thing is not measuring advancement. If you could predict where you're losing people in your pipeline or where you're disengaging with them in your pipeline, perhaps you can focus on those areas and improve them. And the only way you could do that is catching that real-time information as you're interacting with them.
Great. Thanks, Mark. All right, so we talked about the promise. We talked about the roadblocks, the detours, the potholes, if you will. So let's get off of that, and let's start building a proper highway, a proper road to success to that promise. And that's what we're going to talk about next. So if you go, okay, great, thank you. All right, I want to start by framing this in terms of best practices. Those are processes, tools, and technology that the top performers consistently employ to drive best results. You know, as we've done this customer to customer, we've helped develop some of these best practices, but we also encounter them, and where we do, we make sure to integrate them into our approach and our methodologies. Because remember, that's part of the roadblocks, is uninformed implementation. We want to make sure that not only in implementation, but throughout the life cycle of your use of Salesforce, you're taking advantage of best practice methodologies. So how do we do that? How do we build a framework based on best practices? Well, you know, one of the things we like to do is we start with use case definitions, trying to understand exactly those problems you're trying to solve. It doesn't mean learning and automating exactly what you're doing today, because that's not necessarily, it might be best practice, but it's not necessarily one. So we need good use case definitions as part of this framework. What is the process objective, right? The use case objective. Who are the participants and what are their objectives? What data requirements and sources are there? What are the process steps and the workflows? And once we understand that, we can also then optimize it, right? Change it, make it better. We have the technology. Once you understand and have documented those use cases, evaluate your Salesforce environment. Can you get there from here, right? This is, whether it's a new environment or it's an existing one, you really need to understand the barriers that you have in terms of how you want to accomplish that. And then now you have the tools of understanding what you're trying to accomplish, what you have and what you're missing, and what are the technology tools that are going to be required to get you there. Now, by technology tools, I mean Salesforce, I mean their products, I mean features, I mean functions, I mean third-party tools like Utribo, for example, and services to actually successfully implement those use cases and manage them over time. So identify the automation opportunities as we did, appropriate tools and integration, and assemble the technology and the tools to align with those use cases. You know what? I like to say align or die. If you don't have the right things lined up with what you've defined, and then the metrics to measure your success going forward, by the way, you're not going to be able to accomplish this. And then the last step is deploy. Sounds simple, right? But there's testing, there's training, there's then executing, and then it's a closed loop, cycling that back. So building this framework will allow you to understand where you are on the road, where you need to go to your promise, and then what are the tools, technology, services are going to be able to get you there, right? What's the car you're building to get down that road? And again, I think we have a particular use case to talk about for Mark. Mark?
So, okay. So I think the first use case is actually 360, using Sales Amp in their sales pipeline, their lead development and pipeline forecasting.
Right. And this is one for us together. So tracking activities, Sales Amp is an important part of our use case. Creating the context, right?
Yep.
Managing the pipeline versus the forecast. Budgeting the team's available time, recognizing the best practices and implementing them. The leading indicators, remember I talked about metrics? And then identifying the successes and the areas for improvement. And again, this gets back, Mark, to the comment you made earlier about 50% of companies and not tracking.
Yeah, we work with our customers very closely, and I travel a bit. And whenever I travel, I try and attend the local Salesforce user groups. And I've taken a very informal survey, and I found that in many of the user groups, many organizations, and I'd say it's actually more than 50%, use Salesforce, but this is probably an oversimplification, but they're using it as a glorified address book, and they're really not. They're perhaps tracking their contacts and their leads, and perhaps opportunities for forecasting, but they're really not tracking any activities related to those leads and opportunities. And some of the important types of calls that we think can really help address those issues, those problems that I mentioned earlier, are things like the call activity, or when you have meetings, or specific emails related to your sales process, or how often your sales organization is giving presentations, how often are they customers seeing those presentations, and how much time do they spend with them, and documents related to your sales process, whether they be promotional materials or they be actual contracts or proposals that are part of the sales process. I'll go ahead and slip to the next slide here, Bob. And the thing that I found is that it's a great idea to say, okay, we'd like you to track calls, or we'd like you to track these things. But if these tracking activities make extra work for the account managers and sales development folks, they don't want to do it. So wherever possible, tracking activities must be automated. And the tools that are used for tracking must make the users more productive. It must add some value to their day-to-day job. And just counting and marking the date, which often happens if you're forcing the users to manually enter this information, that's really not enough. You've got to look at other dynamics related to these activities, like the time spent on a particular activity. What opportunity or lead was the activity related to, or the event? What stage was the lead or opportunity at during that interaction? Who's calling who? Are your customers calling you, or are the customers communicating with you, or are you reaching out to them? Who's attending the meetings? Often you'll have a call with a person and other people will join. How are you tracking that information? And what are the most interesting things to your customer? It may be you're sending them all kinds of material and they're really focused on a particular area. Would it be great to have that in your sales repository so you can take action on that?
Right.
All right. So let's look at the next example. Okay.
Okay.
Go ahead, Bob.
I'm going to talk a little bit about so this is a chance, by the way, thanks for sticking with us, where we're going to actually talk about putting the things we've just discussed into play, into practice. At Accelerize 360, we're a Salesforce customer and user, as well as a utribo customer and user. And so we have put that technology together with some marketing automation tools to have a centralized Salesforce-based telemarketing flow that we use and track, and that's what I'm going to talk about here. Here are all the flow steps in our use case, and I'm going to walk through a few of these, and then Mark is going to jump in as appropriate to talk about where utribo takes the lead in those particular steps. So you want to go ahead and give me the next slide, please. This should be familiar to everyone, right? It's just a lead report. This is something our telemarketers work from, based on what's assigned to them. By the way, I have messed with the data here so that we're protecting the innocent or the guilty, as it may be. But this is where they begin, right, for the day. So they can click on a particular lead, give you the next slide. It's one that they're going to reach out to and contact. First thing we ask them to do is to scroll down there to the inside view information. And here you can see we have, whoop.
Oh, sorry, Bob.
That's all right. It wants me to speak faster. We want them to learn a little bit about the company before they make the call, so that they're informed on that conversation about what they do and what market they're in, etc. The other thing here is, if for some reason that contact is no longer, or that lead is no longer valid, but the company we still want them to pursue, they can come back to this slide and click on the People tab and find out who else they might want to reach out to and contact. Next slide. Okay. Why don't you give us your little demo here, Mark?
All right. I am on a headset, so it may be difficult to hear the the audio on this because we had to make a quick people change here, but I'm just going to go ahead and play this. What we're going to show here is we're going to actually show when one of Bob's reps, one of 360's reps makes a call to a customer. So we're going to just show the screen here. We're making an outgoing call to Rob Schechterly, CEO of Lighthouse Software Strategies. And we're going to make that call. We're going to say the call is successful. Or oh, he wasn't in. We left a voicemail. And we'll try again soon. And we'll see here that now that outgoing call to Bob was logged into Salesforce automatically.
Exactly. So that means that we had clicked the call from inside the lead record. We were able to track the call. We were able to record the results of the call. And if it had connected, we could record the results of that conversation, all of which then immediately becomes part of the activity history here. Next slide, please. The other thing we have our folks do is the result of the call is to send a follow-up email directly from inside of Salesforce again. We have a marketing automation tool that's integrated with Salesforce. So depending upon that, they have a drop-down list of email templates they can select from. Next slide. They select that, shows them a sample of the email. In this case, a follow-up from leaving that voicemail. And the system with the integration will automatically pull the information from Salesforce about names, etc., and send that email directly out. And like the call, we have email tracking as well integrated directly into Salesforce. So we can see that it was sent. We can see that they opened that particular email and, what the follow-on from that was. So it allows us to, it also, by the way, will trigger a follow-up activity for the telemarketing rep so that a week later they know to reach out and contact that lead again, and they have a complete history here of what's already taken place in those conversations. So why don't you give me the next slide, please, Mark?
Yeah, Bob, just one quick thing. I'm looking at this slide, and you now see that, even with a lead, we're starting to build a very rich view of our interaction with the customer.
Absolutely. You can see outgoing calls, incoming calls, emails, whether the emails were opened, etc. So from within that process, and we're not done, by the way, but I wanted to take a minute here so far to talk about what does that allow us to do in terms of real-time access and insight at Accelerize 360 on what our telemarketers are doing. And we keep clearly a very close watch on this because we want to make sure that we can improve the process, give them better tools, maybe new offers, whatever it takes to up their success rate. So we can measure call efficiency, number of dials versus target, right? How are they doing today in terms of just clicking? It's no longer dialing the phone. In this case, it's clicking on the phone numbers in the lead records. How many times do they actually connect with a human being rather than leaving a voicemail? So because of the way utribo captures that information and logs it in activities, we have reports we can generate to see that difference between when it was just a voicemail, when they actually spoke to someone, and then read the text on what happened on that interaction, as well as the length of the calls. Contact performance, right? We look at trends here. This is very important in this process for us because we want to understand what are the good times of the day? What are they having the most success, in other words? Early morning calls, late afternoon, middle of the day? When is the best time to make these kinds of calls to reach the kinds of targets we're having them reach out to? The time, what titles are working more effectively? What industries are we getting better traction in? And as a result of that, what might we want to change if there's an industry we want to penetrate and we're not having as much success? So we look at all of those in terms of contact performance. Meetings, right? How many meetings do we get out of that? Because that's ultimately what we want them to do, is educate someone and set up a follow-on meeting. How many callbacks are they making? And on what point of the callback do we actually get a chance to talk to somebody, right? Is it first call, second, third, fourth, fifth? Where do we actually get a chance to have that conversation? And then, as I said, creating the follow-up activities as a result of that, again, in Salesforce. So that's where they manage their world, which is what we want them to do. Remember, we just like we saw the stat of, salespeople spend 59% of their time not in doing sales activities. Well, we want their telemarketing folks to be doing telemarketing sales activities. Having it all in one place allows them to do that. And then the email performance, right? Some of this we ultimately get from inside of Salesforce, and we can also look at our marketing automation tool, but they're tightly integrated. So how many of those emails that they sent were actually opened? That's a good one for them to follow up on more quickly, and we make sure to send them a new task for that as a result. How many clicks? So somebody opened the email, did they click on our website? Did they click on an offer that was included in email, right? Understanding what the behavior there was. And then responses. Sometimes, we ask them to, to respond to us, to set up a time for a call back. How many of those do we get, and how do we track those and tie them to new tasks as well? So there's a lot we get from this process as a result of this tight integration of Salesforce, Utribo, marketing automation for running our business, right? And we help our clients do this as well, but we're a customer in this case. This is a customer success story. With that, again, I think we have an opportunity for a deeper dive here on leads from Mark.
Yeah, and I've for the sake of the presentation, I've extrapolated some info from some other customers to show how they were looking at their lead pipeline. And in this case, we actually had a customer who created some graphics that they put right into the lead detail, so they could look at the time that was spent on various types of activities related to a lead, and they actually compared that to the averages of a successful lead conversion. So if you see here, the blue line shows the average amount of time spent on various activities related to converting a lead to a qualified opportunity, and representing how this specific lead looked against those averages. The other thing that they decided to look at was just looking at the activity related to this specific opportunity in terms of numbers, and looking at the number of minutes of activity, and then looking at the number of activities in terms of the record account, and then again looking at those against the averages for the organization. We all have all good salespeople rarely want to give up, and often, what they learn sometimes is that sometimes we spend too much time on an opportunity or a lead that just won't convert. So we have another user experience here. I'm going to go ahead and run this, but we've lost the audio unfortunately because of the change in presenter, and I've got a headset.
All right, I don't think there was any audio on this one anyway.
Yeah, and I dare not unplug my headset, so we're going to go ahead and just play this quickly here. What we're showing is now we're now looking at an opportunity, and we've got an inbound call coming from a customer, and it's about a site license for 100 users. I'm just going to stop the video here quickly because I want to show you a few things that are happening here. So we received the inbound call from the customer, and SalesAmp identified it looked at the database and found the matching number to this phone number and pulled the information related to this phone number. So it pulled up the name of the account and the opportunities related to that phone number. And within this experience, while I'm on the phone with the customer, I found out that the PO should be ready should be in by Friday afternoon. Of course, you can see I'm not a good speller or a very good keyboardist, but I went ahead and recorded that information and dropped the call, and I just quickly rated the call quality. So, sorry. So the point here is what we've now done is we've not only captured that outbound call, the outbound calling of our sales development, but as our account managers. And this is, by the way, this is something that I find a lot with customers is I talk to the folks that are doing the operational assessment, and they say, well, our account managers don't talk on the phone very much. Well, I dispute that. I think a good account manager spends at least, if he can, 20 to 25% of his time at a minimum with customers, either in person or on the phone. And more often than not these days, it's on the phone. So what this does, again, and then this is another example of where we put some information related to the opportunity, the activities related to the opportunity, into the view, the detailed view of the opportunity. So the first one in this case, the customer was looking at the time spent. Obviously, it's a lot more time. Opportunities sometimes take longer to close than converting a lead. But what they really looked at in this case is they looked at the types of the time spent within particular parts of their sales process. So they may spend they looked at the different types of activities and then the time spent in each part of the sales process. So, for example, on needs collection, we found that there was a lot of on needs collection. There was a lot of time spent, not a time spent making outbound calls, collecting information from the customer, and on objection handling. We found that when we were starting to work with documents and perhaps contracts, we're handling objections from the customer. There was a lot of time. Spent on document review. So that kind of gives you the profile. Often we find as a sales organization that the rest of the company is not necessarily aligned with our needs in these various times of the sales process. And again, the second thing that they did was just look at the time spent on an opportunity. I think we do a lot of, again, we look at the back end of the opportunity, and we look when it's going to close. I mean, one analogy I used from a past life was I wish I had something like this in place. Was I used to have a sales team of about 35 people, and it was a publicly traded company. And invariably what would happen is, the quarter would come to the end, and we'd have these deals that were kind of hanging towards the end of the quarter. And often they were all at 95% of the pipeline. And I wish, where would I spend my time? Should I fly to New York, where the sales rep has only left 15 voicemails for the customer and he's got it at 95%? Or should I go to LA, where the customer's spent 6 hours on the phone with the client and he's calling us more than we're calling them? Having that information to me is incredibly valuable. And of course, there's other ways to leverage activity information. Bob spoke to some of these for sure, but here's some examples are, call disposition. What actually happened on the call? One of the things that we found is that when we start to track activities, we want more and more information. So actually identifying how the call went is important. Another thing that we found is just tracking just general activity what's related to an opportunity or a lead is important. I've shown you a bit of that. And then, of course, we always find, and this is an interesting story, calls by rep. We once had a customer, they suddenly decreased their call activity by 40%, and we were very concerned. We thought we were losing the customer. But in fact, what they had done is they'd had a meeting. They've collected that they were making a lot of calls, and their sales reps were really competing to make calls because that's how they were scoring them. They had one rep who was making over 200 calls a day. But what they discovered was that they wanted to change the focus of the sales organization to having a successful outcome where they reviewed a presentation or they agreed to a demo, and the time that they actually spent on the phone with each person went up and the number of calls went down. So overall, collecting this information really helped them make a strategic change in the way they did their sales. And of course, Bob's in marketing and I'm in sales, and it's always nice to, for sales organizations, to go back to marketing and say, well, where's all of our actual lead activity happening after we've got these various sources of lead referral? So which are the good leads, to steal from a Glenn Ross segment? And Bob also talked about calls by the time of day. We'll find many organizations. Of course, it depends on the time zone that that company's head office in, and it depends on the type of product you're selling. But there's often a period of time and day where you see the most call productivity from your sales organization, and it's really good to look at that and look at ways either to extend that or expand it. And then of course, call results summary, looking at each individual and seeing, who's calling who? Are your reps calling all the time and they're never having any callbacks from their customers? Sometimes that's extraordinarily valuable. I presume that that's very valuable within the opportunity cycle because if it's a one-way conversation, rarely does a deal get done, in my opinion. Bob, back to you.
Great. Thanks so much. A lot of good information there, and for this particular use case, I guess my summation is it really, really works. And I will admit, we chose a simple use case to run through, but after all, we have a 1-hour webinar here. But the fact is, the promise of Salesforce around lead management and telemarketing is part of that. It's something that we've really achieved here in terms of documenting our use cases, bringing the tools together, combining the different components, building the best practices, and then executing, monitoring through the metrics that Mark just talked about, and ultimately coming back to refine the process. That's what achieving the promise is about. For you, the use cases that you need to manage, this may be one of 5 or 10 or 20 or 100. But that's how you're going to get down that road. But, it's not enough to just be on the road. You've got to stay on the road, and that's why I want to take the last couple minutes here just to talk about that a little bit. So can I have the next slide? And then staying on that road also depends somewhat on which of those barriers we talked about up front that you encounter, right? What detours, what potholes, what road closed signs you hit. Even though you built this great road, somebody's messing with it. Now, you might have an internal Salesforce admin, support organization, dev team, or maybe you not. Even if you do, sometimes you just need temporary bandwidth, and that's what this slide is about. An extra lane on your road if you want, right? If you think about it that way. Think about it on the freeway, every once in a while you get that HMV lane, HOV rather, a lane, either on the left or the right, depending where you live on the country, to help you. That's what on-demand is about. Just what you need when you want it. Right? You might have people that can do this, but they don't have the bandwidth. It might be something that you just never, like a trigger that you never deal with. Our on-demand support is designed to be just that. What are the specific things that our customers tell us they need quick help with the most? And we put a specific cost and value on that so you can make it very easy. You can go online, you can identify what it is you need, you can buy it online, give us the information around what you want online, we'll execute, you can chat with us if you need to, and get it back to you as quickly as possible. So where that makes sense, either because you don't have a big Salesforce environment and you need help with these things on a regular basis, or you just need some quick help to fill in. That's what on-demand support is about, to help you stay on the road. Next slide, please. But sometimes you hit bigger barriers, right? You need a more comprehensive approach. We do that as well. We do that with something we call Value Wave. This might be for some of our mid-market clients that say, we don't want to invest in a stable of Salesforce experts. We want somebody else to fulfill that role for us. And so that's where we help them look at the whole Salesforce life cycle while staying flexible. Not everybody needs everything or the same things throughout their life cycle of using Salesforce or other cloud solutions. So I'm not going to talk about all these things bullets, obviously. This is just a sort of a sample menu here, if you will, of the different kinds of things we do as part of a Value Wave agreement with customers to help make sure they stay on the road and that they can continue to expand that road into other Salesforce products. If they're a Sales Cloud user, maybe they need to go to Service Cloud or Marketing Cloud, or they need to deploy some new AppExchange apps like Utribo. So it's all designed to keep you on the road and to get you to that promise, whatever it may be, and frankly, it's probably more than one. So let's talk about the last slide here before we take some Q&A. All right, so let's wrap this up a little bit, and let's wrap it up with 5 things you really need to do and we talked about these throughout the presentation, but I wanted to bring them together. It's kind of a takeaway, right? This is what, for sitting and putting us here for an hour, these are key things you need to think about as you think about your journey towards the promise. So define to optimize. That means clear use cases. If you don't know what parts of the promise or what they're going to mean to you if you actually achieve them, then you're not going to be able to get there ever. I don't care what kind of a road you build. Evaluate your current environment. Is it a roadblock or an enabler? Did you have a great implementation or a not so great one? And what do you need to do about that? What are the tools, what are the changes, what are the products, the partners you need, the services you need to bring to bear to get that environment where it needs to be to move you down the road? Then open the toolbox. Once you understand that, plug the gaps. There are some gaps in Salesforce. That's why there's solutions like utribo. That's okay. But what are they? Are they gaps you plug with a service from somebody like Accelerize, or with an App Exchange product from utribo, or a combination of both? Always remembering that with that toolbox, you're trying to plug it with best-in-class processes, best practices, best solutions. Then build a strong support model. Things change constantly. It's not enough to implement it, to put in support processes and people to manage what you've got today. That's only step one. What about managing what you're going to have to deal with tomorrow? It's not just your change. It's change from the market. It's change from your partners. It's change from your customers. You got to be prepared, and you have to have a support model that reflects that, both internal and external. And so you can react quickly, and in some cases, proactively, not waiting for change to slam you upside the head, but rather to get out in front of it and to get some competitive advantage from being prepared and being proactive. And last is rinse and repeat. That's by the way, a great little marketing phrase. That was something where Procter & Gamble once said, how can we double sales of conditioner? Add 3 words to the label, rinse and repeat. Well, here you're going to get more value by thinking about that. Be flexible, be nimble, be opportunistic. Do this, build the metrics into the processes, understand what's going on, measure it, as Mark showed us, and then come back and adjust, and do that often. This isn't something that you do once a year, once a quarter. When you see something based on the metrics trending in a direction you don't want it to, or going in a good direction, you want to harvest that and take advantage of it, do that. You know change is coming, prepare for it. Rinse and repeat. So those are my 5 takeaways for today. We have a little over, we got 6 minutes or so, 5 minutes to talk about some Q&A. So I've got a few here. Lastly, last slide. We'll just stick there for a minute, Mark. We promised you some offers today. At Accelerize, we have a no-cost solve the Salesforce problem, something around 20 hours in effort, but it's a way for you to get to know us and us to get to know you at the same time, solve a real-world problem that you have today. Remember what I said about Accelerize 360? Focused, your value. And then utribo, and Mark, you might want to talk about this quickly, but is offering an extended beta program.
Yeah, currently we're in extended beta. We've been in operation for about 1.5 years and been with customers for 9 months, but we're currently on an extended beta program where companies can try us for free for an extended period of time, several months. And basically all you have to do is go to App Exchange. You can click on this link or go to App Exchange and download our app, and we will engage you in our extended beta program thereafter.
Great. You'll, as I said, you'll be getting this presentation. You can go on our websites and find those things. So I've got some questions here, Mark. Since I've been doing most of the talking, I'm going to toss you the first one here. This person says, our sales team primarily works remotely and often has to on the go, so desktop sales call solution isn't always practical. Is there a mobile version?
Yes. Right now we have a mobile version in beta, and we have selected customers trialing. And what this does is it allows calls coming into the customer to be routed to their mobile phone. And when they make outbound calls, those calls are presented to the customer as a company-owned number, not the mobile number. And the calls are logged automatically in Salesforce in both scenarios. And because I'm often, when I'm on my mobile phone, even with a smartphone, it's tough to take notes while you're on the phone with a customer. We actually pop up a workflow that collects the information about how did the call go after the call is completed.
Great. Here's one I see an observant person when I was showing my slides said, I see you use Marketo in your example. We use Pardot. Man, oh man, I'm never going to pronounce that right. Will that work in the use case, the flow that we showed? Absolutely. As a matter of fact, as you know, there's a number of products out there that marketing automation products that integrate with Salesforce. We are in the process of migrating from Marketo to Pardot. So if you're using Pardot, everything you saw today works pretty much the same way. Clearly, some screens will look a little different, but that end-to-end process enabling that use case can still be achieved. Mark, here's somebody that says, can you talk more about the analytics capabilities and perhaps provide a scenario where they come in handy with existing users?
Okay. Well, one of the things that we do, and we recommend strongly, is Salesforce actually has a really strong data model for tracking activities, or they're called tasks or events in Salesforce. And we actually use that native object to store all the calling activity with our application. So that means that any report within Salesforce that's tracking activities and tasks can be used to track activities and tasks with our application. Again, of course, you can build a whole bunch of very cool reports within Salesforce. We run into a lot of organizations that also have scorecards and tools to pull information out of Salesforce into a more comprehensive reporting environment. Again, in our scenario, all the information is stored in Salesforce, and it can be pulled with other Salesforce information into those reporting tools.
Sounds cool. Great. All right, I've got 1 minute. I'm going to try and get a quick one in here. Person says, how do I evaluate my current Salesforce environment if I'm not sure what it should be versus what it is? That's a great question. After all, you know what you've got, but you don't necessarily know, what is the promise in this area, or where is it weak, where is it wrong, where have I done something, that's not giving me the best benefit. In other words, how do you find a way to get the biggest return, the best ROI on that investment you've made in Salesforce? This is obviously self-serving on my part, but this is a good place to bring in an expert like Accelerize 360, somebody who can come in and, based on what we've seen at other customers and other clients in your industry, understand what you're doing today, what you could be doing, and help you identify those gaps, and essentially help you build a prioritized list of things you need to do to move from where you are to where you want to be. Right? This is one where if only you knew now what you will know then. So that would be my answer to that question is find an expert, something we do all the time, and they can help you chart that course. So we're at the end of our time today. I'd like to thank you all again for joining us. You will be getting a follow-up email. We'll be sending you links to the recording, the slides that I mentioned today, and please go to our website and grab those free offers that we have today so you can get a little more value and start moving down the road. Thank you so much, and we hope to see you on a future webinar. Bye-bye.